Hi children, hope you're all keeping fine and safe at home. This is Sir Polly once again from the Department of Political Science. In the previous videos, I was trying to explain the meaning of Cold War. And by now, you have already know what is the meaning of Cold War, what are the military alliances formed during Cold War, etc. Today, we shall go much more deep into the particular topic Cold War, and we shall learn more and more about Cold War. I have selected two topics for today. The first topic is ideologies involved in Cold War, and the second topic is Cuban Missile Crisis. So my dear boys and girls, today we are going to learn two topics from the first chapter, the Cold War. The first one is the ideologies involved during Cold War and the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, keep your mind and ears open and let's get into the first topic. The ideologies involved in Cold War. You know, Cold War is a competition, tension and confrontation between the two superpowers or the two power blocks, the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc. But if you study in detail, we find that it is not just a rivalry between two groups or military conflict between the two superpowers. In fact, the Cold War has much more deeper meaning. It is actually an ideological conflict. A conflict between two ideologies. In other words, in Cold War, there are two ideologies involved. And that's what we are going to learn today. The two ideologies involved during Cold War are, number one, capitalism. Second one is socialism. Capitalism is the ideology followed by the Western Bloc led by the US. And that is why very often this bloc is also known as capitalist bloc. Why capitalist bloc? Because this bloc was following capitalism. And the second ideology involved during the Cold War is socialism. And this ideology was followed by the Eastern Bloc. And so this bloc is also popularly known as socialist bloc because they were following socialism. Now you see, one bloc was following capitalism, another bloc was following socialism. And actually, Cold War was a conflict between these two ideologies. Each bloc was trying to establish that their ideology is the best. The capitalist bloc was proving that capitalism is the best. And the socialist bloc was proving that socialism is the best. And there was a competition between these two, and that leads to the Cold War between the two blocs. Now, what is actually capitalism and socialism? Actually, these are the two terms that you will be learning in economics much more details. But here in political science, you have to learn at least what exactly socialism and capitalism mean, its meaning at least. I'm going to explain to you now the meaning of capitalism as well as socialism. Capitalism is an economic policy where all the means of production are owned by the private individuals with an aim of making profit. Means of production means what? The factories, industries, even agriculture, healthcare, everything will be owned by the private individuals, and their aim is only to make profit. Such system is known as capitalism, and which was followed by the Western Bloc, America, and others. On the other side, socialism is the opposite of capitalism. Here, all the means of production are owned by the government. No private individuals can have any means of production. And here the aim is the social welfare. So, you see, during Cold War, two ideologies were involved. One is capitalism, followed by the Western Bloc. Another one is socialism, followed by the socialist bloc. Capitalism is a policy where all the means of production are owned by the capitalist or the individuals with the aim of making profit. On the other side, socialism is an economic policy where all the means of production are owned by the government with the aim of social welfare. And Cold War was exactly the conflict between these two ideologies, socialism and capitalism. I'm sure you are clear with this first topic, ideologies involved in Cold War. We shall move to the second topic for today. The second topic is Cuban Missile Crisis. Cuban Missile Crisis. It's a very, very interesting topic, and it is a classical example for the confrontation between the two blocs, the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc. I'm sure you must be remembering when I taught you about the meaning of Cold War. Cold War is a competition, tension and confrontation between the two blocs. And I explained what exactly the meaning of confrontation. Confrontation refers to a situation of coming face to face. The two rival groups come face to face and everyone will think that there will be a war, but they will not fight. And Cuban Missile Crisis is a classical example for such confrontation. So get ready, we are going into the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, when you hear the word Cuban Missile Crisis, it's all related to a country called Cuba. And it is also related with the missiles. And crisis, of course, you know, some problems. So in Cuba, missile, some problems. Here, actually three countries are involved. The first one is the Cuba itself. Let's first learn about Cuba. Cuba is a very small island nation on the coast of the United States. It is very near to the USA, but unfortunately, it is not a friend of USA. It was actually an ally of the other bloc, that is USSR. It was ruled by a very dynamic and energetic communist leader by the name Fidel Castro. Maybe you might have heard about this particular man, Fidel Castro. If you have not heard, you should go to the Google and find out about him. He was a very, very dynamic man, and he was the man behind the formation of Cuba. He is no more, but when the Cuban Missile Crisis took place, Fidel Castro was the leader of Cuba. So Cuba is an island nation on the coast of the United States, but it was not a friend of USA, it was an ally of USSR, and the leader of Cuba was Fidel Castro. The second country is USSR. You know already, USSR means Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. It was the leader of the Eastern Bloc, and the competition during the Cold War was between the USSR and the USA. So naturally, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, this country has to be there. And the leader of USSR at that time of Cuban Missile Crisis was Nikita Khrushchev. Nikita Khrushchev. And next country is USA, the United States of America, and at that time the president of USA was John F. Kennedy. So I have told you the three leaders and the three countries involved during the Cuban Missile Crisis: Cuba, Fidel Castro; USSR, Nikita Khrushchev; USA, John F. Kennedy. Now let us try to understand how Cuban Missile Crisis took place. As I told you, Cuba was nearer to USA but was an ally of USSR. In 1961, the leaders of USSR was feeling that at any moment USA might attack Cuba and overthrow Fidel Castro and might establish their control over Cuba. And as an ally of USSR, USSR was worried. Cuba is a small nation. At any moment, it will be attacked by USA. And so USSR decided to keep nuclear missiles in Cuba and convert Cuba into a military base for USSR. So in 1962, the leader of USSR, Nikita Khrushchev, placed nuclear missiles in Cuba. Now, when USSR placed the nuclear missiles in Cuba, it was very close to the America. The Americans were on fire. They were getting nervous, they were getting frightened because their enemy, USSR, has come very close to their country and have made Cuba as their base, and they have kept missiles in Cuba. So the American president, John F. Kennedy, and his advisors decided that by any means they will force Nikita Khrushchev, the leader of USSR, to remove these missiles from Cuba. At the same time, they did not want to have a war because they know the principle of logic of deterrence. So what did John F. Kennedy do? He ordered the American warships to block the ships coming from USSR to Cuba, to block. So the American warships were in the ocean, blocking the ships coming from USSR to Cuba. And everyone in this world was thinking that there will be a war, and it might be a third world war. And the whole world was thinking that it is going to be very dangerous. And a chaotic situation was created in the whole world. And that chaotic situation created because of the placement of missiles in Cuba by the USSR is actually known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. But thank God, both the countries know very well of their strength, and they use the principle of logic of deterrence. The USSR ships turned back and there was no war. But the Cold War continued. So my dear boys and girls, I'm going to wind up for this chapter of Cold War. Before I wind up, let me recap the topic that we have learned today. We have learned two topics. First, the ideologies involved in Cold War. In Cold War, there were two ideologies, socialism and capitalism. And second point, we learned the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was a crisis created by the placement of nuclear missiles in Cuba by the USSR. And everyone thought that there would be a war between the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc, the USA and USSR. But there was no war, but it just only Cold War existed. And I'm sure you have understood the meaning of the ideologies involved in the Cuban Missile Crisis, and this is my last class for the first chapter, the Cold War era. Take care, stay home, stay safe. Thank you so much.